So we'll go again for the devlog. So this one will be a bit longer. So let's go, I guess. So the first thing that I did outside of making a sadness system, well, mostly remaking the sadness system that I had made for the old version of Negertail Sans, is making, or mostly again remaking, the Bone Burst attack with, how to say that, a better control with the sadness. The old version was pretty much working with like state. If you are, the attack was like, it have a version if you have between 0 and 50% of sadness, another one if you're between 50 and 75 from head, another one between 75 and some per 100, and another when you're at 100. And it was like not very satisfying because we were like, okay, my attack does nothing until it reaches X point, and then it stays the same until I reach X point again. And what I changed is that no, it's like change slowly, but it changes as your sadness level increase. And here is the final result and a view of a few versions of the attack based on the sadness. I also, since I had to skip a few parts of code and all, I added blue balls and other things like that. But normally you can clearly see the change as the sadness goes up. So the next thing that I wanted to add to Negatel Sans after was a blue bone wall. So at first it was going well. Then again I had some oversight because I wanted to add something that if the pawn wall is too close to wall, an obstacle, I don't know, an igloo, the end of the map, for example, or even tree, the pawn wall will just stop and go back into the ground. So wanting to add that, I caused a few conflict, mostly because I forgot that there was something called the floor inside of the map, and that the floor was also detected in the collision. So for like 30 minutes, 1 hour maybe, I was like, why in the fuck doesn't it move? And disappeared just after. That's only after that I looked at the floor and was like, wait, that is a floor. That I remembered why it was probably not working. And after a few tweaks and change, as you can see, it worked fine. And it isn't a buggy mess anymore that gets stopped by the floor. So after what I did was working on Negative Sans, first blaster attack. So it has two modes, but for now I will only show the first mode of it. That is pretty much just a simple caster blaster with a few tweaks. First is something that you have on some Undertale game, not a lot, but still, is that if you hold the attack, it will like charge a timer inside of the tool, and when you release it, based on the timer and how long you ordered it, the blaster will have a bigger size. Or other thing that's an example that we'll take here in this case, it's mostly a passive of the blaster that will be improved. The passive being that if you get hit by the beam, it will slow down the opponent. And the slowdown and other thing slightly change based on how long you have ordered the attack. And if you hold it for too long, the attack will be fired automatically. It's pretty much when you reach the max, it should follow you. So that's something you have to take into account. So I decided after to work on an attack that a lot of games use for, well, negative sense, being a spin bone. So a few things that I wanted for this spin bone is, for something that I really like is that you have at least the bone shrinking or growing when it's spawn. And what I really wanted is that the bone work in a way that isn't just you click a bone appeal and it spin. Which you would be like, yeah, but that's the point of a spin bone. It spin. But that's the part that I keep. The fact that it spin. But I wanted something more, and what I decided to do is that the attack would work with 2 clicks. The first click is here to tell to the attack where you want your bone to spawn. The second click tells to the game, and mostly to the bone, where it is supposed to move, which means that first you click, and on your second click, the bone will spawn where you click it first and go slowly, well, technically mostly depending on the distance between where the bone spawned and where you click it, and when it reaches that point it just disappears. And obviously, since it's a spin bone, it spins while doing all of that, for pretty obvious reason. The next thing that I did after, well, all the negative sense work, well, most of it at least, was to add the beginning of the second phase, mostly testing that shit weren't exploding when you reach phase 2, since that tend to happen. And also to do some edit to the phase 1 sadness bar, to copy paste it into phase 2, because why the fuck not? And mostly because I was too lazy to make a new one. And also fixing a few bugs, because when I tested with a friend, not this version of Negative Sans, but the one before that used the same GUI, there was a bug where a part of the UI, mostly the blue part, the one that show, well, how much sadness you have, etc., was for some reason going outside of the bar, which is pretty problematic. But yeah, that's all for that part. So after, I again decided to work on something for the phase 2, being the bone rush. So I wanted to make the bone rush in a way that you send your bone rush, and when it collides with something, it doesn't explode, well, disappear or whatever you want to call it. Instead, a few stars away from like what it's supposed to collide with, so a wall or anything else. If it's like anything outside of a player, and that it's part of the map, the bond will stop, turn around, and come back until or while you launch it, or further away and it will collide with something and explode. Or in general, just directly explode. Another thing that I did was the fact that in the case where if it is a player, it will pass through the player and damage it. Then like a few steps away after the player, it will turn back and try to hit again the said player. Other than that, it was pretty much all I wanted for it, even if later down the line I encountered a bug that is not that important, to be fair, being that when a bomb touches a player, if the player is in high flame, the bomb will not count as touching the player, so it will continue straight forward. So the next thing I worked for was again an attack that have two modes, but I will talk about the second mode later. So the first mode was a classic blaster attack where one blaster spawn on your side, one on your left side, and the other one on your right side, and they both fire toward where you click. The thing is that both blaster shoot three beam, one that goes straight toward where you click it, and the other going on the side. Meaning that you cover a pretty big range in a way, well, mostly if someone doesn't pay attention. So the attack wasn't too hard to make. It just scared me to do a few things that were a bit annoying. One of the things was the fact that I had to touch the blaster system because the blaster system wasn't made to handle multiple beam on a single blaster. So it caused a few issues at first that I fixed pretty quickly. The other issue that I had was like the VFX not working on the middle beam every time, or in some of the beam in general, and it was due to a stupid bug because I didn't name it something properly in the code. So yeah, that was pretty much all for the first mode of the blaster attack. So now for the second mode of the blaster attack. So at first, if you just click with it, I mean that you go on the second mode and just click, it will look like the first mode, but with less beam on the blaster. Instead of having 3 beam per blaster, you have 1. The part of this attack is that you can hold it, and the more you hold it, the more blaster spawn until you reach the max amount, which is 5 blaster to your left, 5 blaster to your right. And well, that's pretty much all with this attack. You can just create a line of blaster, which doesn't cover that much of an area, but if you're able to use it like when someone doesn't look at you or that they're fighting someone else, you can do pretty much good damage. Because even if like at the center of the attack you will probably hit nobody, you cover a large area at the end of the attack and the beginning of it. So yeah, that's pretty much all for this attack. So after I decided to like make the bone zone, well, the equivalent of a bone zone for Negatel Sands is phase 2. So this bone zone, compared to a classic bone zone, don't have bones that come from the ground, but that come from the sky. They pretty much fall one by one at pretty high speed with a small delay between each of them, and they all like fall somewhere inside of the zone, which, well, makes sense. So another thing about it is the fact that based on your rage, the equivalent of sadness for phase 2, the zone will be bigger, and due to the fact that the zone get bigger, there is also more bone. Also made the fact that like the warning of the zone slowly fade as it goes, and same for the zone when they like touch the ground, they slowly start to fade, because it look cooler honestly than just the bone hitting the ground and despawning, or hitting the ground staying and suddenly despawning. Having a fading effect is like cooler. And another thing, it was the fact that I had a hard time with the bone because for some fuck-ass reason, they just didn't spawn where I wanted. And by not where I wanted, it's not like they spawned near the bone zone, but, well, near the zone, but not where I wanted. They were like spawning completely outside of the map, which was like pretty annoying. I did fix it at some point, still not sure who, but I fixed this. So another thing that I added and edit for oral sounds is an attack where you make a bone fall. But compared to like most attack where you click the attack spawn, there is a CD. Here for falling bone, you have up to 15 bone. And when you click, you spawn one bone and it fires automatically. And you can use this attack in row with like only a 0.1 sec. And after this 0.1 sec, you can use another bone until you have normal bone and that the attack need to recharge. It took around like no, not 15, 25 seconds for a bone to come back. So it make like an attack where you can do cheap damage and like quick draw and spam it a bit in a phase since it's for the second phase of Horror Sands. In a phase where you don't have that much spammable attack. And to finish the devlog, I will do a quick showcase of a few things that were added fairly quickly. So one of the first change is about like fidelity when with the collision. For example, I already said a lot of the things that didn't needed the highest collision fidelity. Like for example, the tree here were at max fidelity in terms of collision when they don't need to. I didn't activate the collision because I didn't think of putting it back on for now, but it will, and even with it, it doesn't need to be at max. So another thing is horror sans. What have a lot of attack. It uses mostly is old set, but for example, the slash is less junky compared to before. There is less delay. I also changed like a few assets, for example, this sign that I didn't put it in Anchored, but this sign that have pretty cool texture and that have a pretty decent poly count compared to what I would have done in studio. I added the belt flap in his moveset. You have a lot of other thing. You have the fact that you have a kiss attack, that give you a bit more of like possibility on the long range side of thing. There's the fact that you can also see the damage that you take on the screen directly. Well, everyone can see them, but still. You have this TP dash that makes like technically just a TP, but it kept the name of what it was supposed to be originally. You have the fact that the axe with slash knows the slash spawn at a better timing than before. But yeah, that's